Convo Hour, Rod Nordberg, a photographer-journalist who has spent 2 tours in Vietnam, and Gary Guggenberger, an ex-POW who was released in February. Both Gary and Rod are natives of Cold Spring, Minnesota, and they knew each other previously before his capture. He was with Gary just 6 months, I believe. Just a couple weeks before his capture. Right now, I'd like to introduce you, Rod Nordberg.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning. About 3 years ago, I believe it was, I had the privilege of addressing Augsburg at Cy Melby. Thank God those were different days. We had 500,000 men in Vietnam, or maybe the first contingency of those people were coming home. But they were pretty sad days for America. Not that they aren't at this hour. The news is dark enough, I guess, in the daily papers. But thank God we have brought the ground troops home. Thank God that the men who were known to have been held in captivity, like Gary here, are home. We've still got a job to do concerning a number of men that undoubtedly are alive and held in Indochina in unknown locations. That's Ann O'Connor's department, and she'll fill you in on that. The paper I'm holding here reads well. Peace with honor, says Mr. Nixon through the Chicago Trib on the 24th of January. I don't find that I'm in complete agreement with that sentiment. Nice reading, but there's little substance to those words. We're at anything but a state of peace in Indochina, and the prospects for the future certainly aren't rosy. I think the American role represents about 10 years of blunders throughout our experiences in Indochina. For openers, in discussing some of the blunders that were perpetrated upon that small part of the world, I think we might read a quotation from Madame New, the famous or infamous, take your pick, widow of one of the ruling faction in 1963 in Vietnam. Madame New is the sister-in-law of President Diem, who was killed on November the 1st, 63. And at that particular time, she was lecturing in the United States. She was in California, and when advised of the death of her husband and her brother-in-law and many connected with their government, this was her reaction, quote, "If really my family has been treacherously killed, with either the official or unofficial blessings of the American government, I can predict that the story of Vietnam is only at its beginning." Rather prophetic words, no doubt. Little did we know, I'm sure, at the time of the overthrow of Diem, that everything was going to go downhill and that we were going to get deeper and deeper involved to a point where we ended up with 500,000 men over there. And I have a difficult time in my own mind justifying our 10-year presence over there, whereas I have no trouble justifying a moral obligation and legitimate reason to want to have helped those people. But 10 years just there is no excuse for the things that took place in that country over the last decade. But before discussing the many mistakes that accounted for our elongated presence over there, I think there's a few myths that we might want to clarify, ours and theirs, the U.S. and its allies, and the North Vietnamese and the indigenous element in the South, the Viet Cong. For years we've been told this is a civil war. Well, I have a hard time buying that. When you have North Vietnamese troops scattered throughout Indochina, they're in Laos and have been for the best part of this decade, or the last 10 years. They've been in Cambodia. They're in northeastern Thailand. This can hardly be clarified or qualified as a civil war. Also, if you look back at the history of Vietnam, you find that over the past 1,000 years, 4/5 of that time, the country has been in political disorder. Sometimes it's been 3 countries, sometimes it's been 2, and on rare occasions it was a unified country. But there's a lot of basic differences in the philosophy of the people up north and those in the south. If you just want to talk about the Viet Cong element warring with its government, that in turn, that conceivably then would fit the description of civil war. But in the overall concept, I won't buy it. The peace talks, I think they have been a myth that we've been grasping at straws, and it seems we learn nothing from history. We've forgotten about Tehran, Dumbarton Oaks, San Francisco, Yalta, Cairo, Potsdam, Panmunjom. Every time we sit down to bargain with the communists, we come out with our nose bloodied. And if we understand the Chinese communist philosophy of what they call ta-ta, dan-dan, is talk, fight, fight. You do what is ever appropriate at the time. When you're hurting, that's when you go to the conference table, not to make concessions, strictly to gain advantage on the battlefield. And Ho, of course, way back in 1926, said that he was going to lead all of Indochina to orthodox communism. And I don't see that he ever really deviated from that path other than to call himself a nationalist, which I'm sure he was, but he was still subservient to the communist ideology that he had developed through his 30 years of living in various communist countries. I think the North Vietnamese certainly underestimated their opposition in the South. Mr. Diem, President Diem was given less than a 50-50 chance of surviving 9 months, let alone 9 years. And I'm sure he absolutely stupefied the people in the North when he was able to quiet the wars among the religious factions in the South. He was able to rid himself basically of the corrupt police force which was running Saigon. Saigon was a country in itself, you might say, in the countryside, totally disassociated from South Vietnam's capital. Ho found himself up against a formidable competitor. Diem was able to pull the strings together and start the development of an army. Here was our classic mistake, I think, in not developing a good army under him. The ARVN today are a very effective fighting machine, despite the fact they have a high desertion rate. It runs as high as 12 per thousand per month in non-combat units, 24 per thousand per month in combatant units. That totals out to be a pretty high percentage, but it isn't what the press would have you believe, that these are mass defections and so on. You've got to understand a little bit about the Vietnamese structure, and they don't have the sophisticated society that we do. Let's say you're a ARVN soldier, and you're sent up in the Hue area, and your home is 400 miles to the south. Your pay is extremely meager, and there are no provisions made for your family, whether it be a mother and father, or your wife and kids. There is no, what we know as the U.S. mail system. We like to gripe about that, but there is no mail system in the countryside of Vietnam. There's no way of getting a paycheck down to your wife if you're stationed 400 miles away. And there's no one to tend those crops. And crops are the livelihood of that entire country. About 80% of their economy is built around agriculture. So this man, at planting time, has a way of getting on an aircraft and heading south. He'll go down, he'll plant his crops. But it's not unusual for him to return to his unit or marry up with one of the local rough puff units that are operating near his home region. So the idea of the massive desertions that we've heard about are grossly exaggerated. Another myth I think that should be discussed is, you hear all the time, both in the press and from our intellectual element here that's always prophesying on how we should or shouldn't have conducted our affairs, myself included, I suppose. They say this is the war that couldn't be won. That's a bunch of malarkey. Just pure and simple malarkey. Any war can be won, but you've got to go after the elements that make the war possible. We've been horsing around trying to count bodies, and people is not the objective in eliminating this kind of a war. You have to strangle them logistically. 3 things are required to make a war, maybe others, but the 3 main ingredients would be, you have to have supplies, the ability to move those supplies, and you've got to have the leadership which directs those operations, plus an army, of course. But rather than directing our attention at the man carrying a rifle, had we have seriously strangled the logistical flow of supplies, which means closing the harbor at Haiphong, way back in, I think 65 would have been the appropriate time to do it. A decision was made to unleash our air power. I don't know on what. We hit useless targets for the first 18 months. But nevertheless, the Air Force was brought into play on this thing, and they were asked to fly through the greatest concentration of SAM missiles and anti-aircraft ever assembled on God's earth. But why not, if it's legitimate in 1972 to have closed that harbor in Haiphong, and I feel as belated as it was, it had to be done, why didn't we do it back in 65? It was through that port and the one down in Vinh and one other that was being developed later that better than 80% of their war capabilities flowed into that country. Without fuel oil, for instance, there is no war. You can't move supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail by the thousands if you haven't got fuel to operate those trucks. Not only did that fuel come in through the port at Haiphong and at Vinh, but we even supplied some of it by shipping it to Eastern European communist nations, who in turn were fostering the ability of the North Vietnamese to wage war in the south and in Cambodia and Laos and Thailand. So this to me doesn't make sense when people say this is a war that couldn't be won. Certainly it couldn't have been won in the tactics in which we attempted to conduct the war. We like to think of ourselves as the guy wearing the white hats, and I think morally this is a defensible position that we wanted to do well, but I'm not sure that we haven't created far more problems in Southeast Asia than we've answered by our clumsy conduct in the course of the past 10 years. We start with the errors either of Truman or Ike, and they were compounded as we went through the next 4 administrations to the current situation that we're faced with under Mr. Nixon. And I think if old Uncle Ho had spent a little less time chasing around Russia and studying Marx, if he just had examined U.S. history and picked upon the fallacies of the enemy he was meeting, he would have done a lot better himself. I'm sure Ho never anticipated the loss of almost 1 million of his young men in war, not to mention the destruction of his economy up north and so on. He wasn't a crazy man. Power-hungry and many other adjectives that might apply to him, but certainly the man wasn't dumb. I think if Ho were alive today and could turn the calendar back a few pages, he might have messed around in 1965 until he realized that we were going to direct some air power at him, we were going to mobilize our Navy, bring the 7th Fleet in and bring to bear on his coastal targets. But at that point, if he'd have had any moxie, I think he'd have pulled out and said, okay, he'd go on home and settled for a lot of foreign aid and built up his country and waited till we all went home and then made his move. Because once we were out of that area, I'm sure it's safe to say we'll never go back. And this is certainly true today. I don't care if, I do care, but I mean if it came to pass that hundreds of thousands of North Vietnamese flowed over the borders again, there will not be one more GI going back to fight that battle. And it's a sad state of affairs that we've left Indochina in, and I don't advocate by any means that we reintroduce troops at any time. But it's so tragic that these countries have been put through so much for so little justification. Certainly all wars are immoral, but unfortunately, as sophisticated as man thinks he is, he's never found an answer yet to addressing himself to war other than by acting in kind, to retaliate. And until we have reached a higher level of sophistication, bullets seem to be the only answer to the meeting of naked aggression. And certainly the decision to go to war weighs heavily upon the presidents that have made these decisions. I don't think they were dishonorable men. We may have our disagreements with their decisions all the way through, but I don't think any of us want to accuse these last 5 presidents of treason and willfully sending 50,000 of our kids and 1 million Asians to their deaths. But we can't turn the calendar back. We're faced with history. We've now got to make the best of a very bad situation. Before I go into making some suggestions for the future, I think there's a couple other things I'd like to touch on here, and then I'm going to turn this over to one of the other speakers. In continuing the list of mistakes that we made over there, I think it's fair to say that when you commit soldier number 1 to battle, when that decision is made by the commander-in-chief, there should be some plan in mind to end that conflict. And this, again, was never part of our policy. I think it was either Maxwell Taylor or Mr. McNamara that conjured up the title flexible response. Well, it proved to be a totally unworkable policy. We were only going to match them tit for tat all the way along and never indicate to the enemy that we had a desire to end this thing in the shortest possible time. We didn't learn from the French. Their experience was disastrous over there. I don't think our two situations are at all parallel. The French were a colonialist power. They were there to take the fruits of the labors of the people in Indochina, and I think our reason for being there was far more charitable. In the end, it didn't prove to be any more effective, however. I'm sure we never understood that enemy in the North, his dedication, his logic, or lack thereof. It was obviously a mistake that we never declared war, and this is Congress's fault as much as it would be in the executive's. I have no respect for my congressman on the subject of his failure to introduce a declaration of war if he was willing to continue our troops' presence over there. I see no justification for Gary had to have lived 4 years on a chain in South Vietnam because his legislators here at home lacked the guts to make a decision to get in or get out. And I think this is an unforgivable situation, but it's a sign of the times maybe. The year tour for the GI was a very, very foolish mistake, and I'm sure the military wants to disassociate itself from this policy. You take a young man, put him through boot training, rush him over to Vietnam, he's a greenhorn, he's subjected to combat, he's not ready for it. And by the time he's a tried and seasoned soldier, then you send him home. There's a second fallacy with a one-year tour. After he's been there a few months, he gets to think of himself as a short-timer. Every GI I know had a calendar. You had a calendar with a nice big X going on it every day, didn't you, Gary? Everybody's a short-timer over there. They say if I just live 365 days, I'm going to make it home. And there goes another X. Now if I can live 364. This is hardly the attitude for an effective soldier. It's good PR, but the man isn't apt to go the limit to save his buddy that he might if he thought he was going to be there for the duration, as your fathers were, your uncles, whatever, were in World War II. That war wasn't anything that was handled in any of the fashion that this one has. Another serious problem was we didn't have a unified command. We had the Army, we had the Marines, we had the Green Beret operating separately, other special forces and Rangers and whatnot in there, not to mention 5 other allies. We never remember, I guess, that the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Thais and the Koreans and the Filipinos were all involved in this thing too. The picture of this guy here is of a New Zealander, a Maori, and some of the toughest soldiers I ever met over there. We forget about the sacrifices that were made by so many other people from so many other countries for a common cause. But there was no unified command as there has been in World War I and World War II. There's got to be to have any sense of direction and a common cause. But everybody was doing their own thing, and it didn't pan out. Certainly the idea of letting Washington make field decisions was ridiculous. I'm not in favor of an all-military control, but this got to the point of being ridiculous. A field commander couldn't make a day-to-day decision on the most minute things. He had to get clearance from Washington, and sometimes this meant the war strategy people had to get together. Well, some of them were out playing golf, and some of them were down in who knows where vacationing, and our guys paid the price for those idiotic mistakes along the way. Many of our guys died because their commanders couldn't make a decision in the field at the time it had to be made. Some of the guys went over this authority and did it, and they ended up getting court-martialed. There were far too many men in Vietnam, our men. 500,000 guys in that little country is ridiculous. Vietnam is smaller than the state of Minnesota, and the whole concept of putting an army of 500,000 over there is just foolishness. And I'm sure the military never wanted to go that way, but this flexible response theory developed by civilians in Washington is what made that policy necessary. There were too many officers and too many medal-hungry people over there that wanted to look good in their files, looking for promotions today. We've got more colonels and generals, far more than we ever had at the end of World War II, and this is a sad state of affairs. More medals have been passed out. It's just like throwing candy out in the audience, the way medals were tossed out during the Vietnam conflict. I think we lacked knowledge all the way through on who we were dealing with, and we lacked an objective. A touchy subject to a lot of people, one that was opened up by the Vice President a few years ago about an irresponsible press. I'd go a lot farther than that in selecting an adjective. They were absolutely sickening in their performance, not only in Vietnam. That was bad enough. But then let's say you had 10% of the reporters over there doing a good job, but if it was sent back to Madison Avenue and went through one of a half a dozen offices up there that control what comes into your house, that news came out just painted the way they wanted it. A big mutual admiration society. For the most part, the guys that I met that served in the press corps, their minds were made up, just about as neat as a row of bunk beds in a boot camp. They all fit the slot. And this is a sad state of affairs. We needed a couple of Ernie Piles over there. But in any event, you were forced to accept with your dinner every night a diet of the bad guys being the Americans, and if it didn't put us in negative light and if it wasn't bloody, don't bother showing it. And this was not the situation. I could spend an hour on the subject of the press alone over there. But this war has been the most over-publicized and the least understood of any in our history. Certainly we made a mistake in not building up the ARVN Army, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Given the proper leadership and the training, they're darn good soldiers. We had the same situation in Korea. There wasn't a worse army in the world in 1950 than the Korean Army. Those rocks were pathetic. I know GIs actually had to shoot South Vietnamese that got in their way and couldn't handle an order. But eventually they developed into one of the finest and most respected fighting forces in the world. They're vicious. That's a whole other story in itself, but they are effective. Belatedly, we've given the South Vietnamese weapons that can match those that are held by their counterparts in the north, the enemy. But for years they fought with old-fashioned weaponry like this New Zealander is holding here. It's handing a guy a deer rifle and sending him out against a machine gun is what it amounted to, and they had no pride in their units. This slowly has changed, and it's one of the few things in Vietnamization that I find a great deal of satisfaction in. By the way, the word Vietnamization is a myth. Let's call it Americanization. We have Americanized the Vietnamese army, and I don't think this has had particularly good consequences in many areas. Let's just contrast the North Vietnamese and their counterparts, the Viet Cong, against the ARVN. There are no draft card burners, of course, in Hanoi. You wanted for the Army, you're in the Army. I don't know of any boats going to Sweden. But they are removed from a society that would give them anything contrary to what the military wants them to learn. They are the most dedicated soldiers that I have ever had any occasion to learn anything about. So they're sent down south, and with all kinds of slogans drummed into them, little things that you'd consider trite, little things you learned in school, see the fox jump or something. This military logic was hammered into them in the same way. They could recite Ho on all kinds of things. General Jep, they could bring out a book and say, well, here's my reason. You couldn't ask him why he's here. He'd have to give you a textbook definition. They weren't allowed to think for themselves. Now you put that up against an ARVN soldier who's patterned his activity after the American. He wants his weekends off. He wants lots of girls around. He wants a ration card. He's interested now in stereo. Beer was something he didn't have any particular interest in until the American came along and cluttered his whole countryside with aluminum Hams cans. But today, you've got an army there that's thinking about all those things. Very few of them are the dedicated fighters that would become the match for the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong soldier. So despite the fact they've got better than 1 million men under arms is hardly the answer. They would have done a lot better to have a third of that number and really turn them into professional soldiers and also paid them. What those people get is sickening. It isn't even $20 a month, I don't believe, for a draftee. Okay, let's quickly just run through some of the tactical errors that the United States perpetrated upon these people and that have sunk them into the quagmire they're in. Getting back to this thought of when you declare war, you better have an idea to win. We never did. We never told Ho Chi Minh that we might invade his country. We told him we had no intentions of toppling his government. This was idiotic. If you're going to go to war, tell him you're going to clobber him. Even if you're not going to do it, make the threat. So he's got to be on edge. He's got to have a big, massive standing army at home. He never needed that. Ho could send all his young studs down south. He didn't need to keep, he had the women and kids up north to defend his bases and his communications lines, transportation, and so on. But good old Uncle Sam, he sent the word over there, we're not going to topple your government, we won't invade, we won't enter into hot pursuit, you can have Cambodia and Laos for your sanctuaries. We don't like it, but we'll tolerate it. And we told them that we wouldn't blockade their harbor, we wouldn't use mines, we didn't even use psychological warfare on them in the north. We could have destroyed hundreds of the lies that they were perpetrating against their people up there. As an example of one, all during the war, Ho Chi Minh told his people that if their sons didn't come home, it's because we didn't take prisoners. We killed everybody. Well, hell, we had 35,000 of them locked up down there. Why didn't we take their pictures? Let them sign it. Say, hi, Mom, I've got a leg blown off, but I'm okay. Whatever. Send the leaflets up north and destroy the lie that we killed all their people. We never did this. I don't know. We got people in Washington that just don't come through on any wavelength that I've ever been able to get on. Well, these failures at home and in Vietnam created the reluctant warrior that was serving a divided nation, and that the GI should lose his spirit is certainly an understandable thing. I don't find it's understandable that he should take his frustrations out on his own body and go over to the murderous heroin that was available to him over there. I'm not going to make any qualifications or statements about marijuana. I don't smoke myself. I don't understand it. But that the GI should fall prey to this white death that came in the form of this 97 to 100% pure heroin is beyond my understanding. Gary might want to touch on this later. He probably knew fellas in his own outfit that were plagued with this sort of thing. But in any event, we have divided our people here at home because of an ill-handled 10-year foray into Indochina, and now we've got to suffer the consequences. But I think we can rebind our wounds here at home. We seem to be a forgiving people, and we try to dismiss now from our minds that we have some obligation to the Vietnamese. But I hope you'll rationalize that through and in your own mind justify a logistical support of the government of South Vietnam. Again, I'll be critical of the press in their presentation to you as to the popularity of or unpopularity of their government. I lived in South Vietnam for better than a year and a half, and I won't buy the line that the New York Times has done such a good job selling, AP, UPI, Time, Newsweek. They have convinced you that Tu is a dictator and an absolute ruler who is bloodthirsty and has no consideration for his people. If you have the opportunity to travel that part of the world and spend some time there, I think you'll find that to be a lie. And it's been conjured up intentionally, and for what reason, I don't know. We did the same thing against ZM back in '63. Full-page ads were taken out in these papers and magazines building up a hate ZM campaign. But the people that lived over there at that time and really knew the situation, and I would point to someone like Marguerite Higgins, Pulitzer Prize winner, who wrote the book Our Vietnam Nightmare. I'd strongly urge you read that book if you want some understanding of what took place during those years. But Tu is certainly a strong-handed leader. He has to be. He's in a time of war. We criticize him because he was the only candidate that ran in the election. Well, he was a victim of his own insistence in watering down the number of candidates that would oppose him. The last time he ran, there were 11 slates of candidates. Actually, there were 18 that applied. 7 of them were disqualified because of their pro-communist positions. Communism was outlawed under their constitution at that time. It was in our own constitution until just a couple of years ago. After 1940, we never had another communist on the ballot until 1968, or was it the 72? 68, I don't think we had a communist party that was active in this country. And who are we to dictate whether communism should be a legal party in their country or not? Who are we to dictate whether they have any certain form of government? I don't think that's our mission over there. But be a little charitable and try to diversify your reading before you make judgments about the form of government that those people have. Now, Tu, as I say, tried to pare down the number of contestants that would run, but he overreacted. He made it very difficult for qualification. Only 2 might have made it. One did. Big Min, General Min, who was a very popular Southern general, a Buddhist, did qualify. Key might have been able to make it, his former vice president, but he and Big Min decided, hell, let's put a little egg on this guy's face and we'll embarrass him for all time and we'll pick up the chips a little later. So they both withdrew. Big Min had the opportunity to run, but he said it looked like a rigged election to him. Now, of all the accounts that I've been able to read about people who watched that last election, it was fairly well handled, probably a little better than our own Cook County in Chicago and other abuses that are known to take place around here. Well, I've spent more time than I should up here. I know you want to meet the 2 other guests this morning, but in closing, I would just say let's go back to that headline and see what we as individuals can do to bring that thing true. Right now, it's a dream. There is no peace with honor. But hopefully that day's coming. Thank you very much. Sitting over here is a young gal who's somebody I think we can properly identify as Miss Enthusiasm, Miss Dedication. Her name is Ann O'Connor. She's from West St. Paul, a senior at Sibley High. I just today received a copy of the May 2nd Sun newspaper that circulates the fringe area of the Twin Cities, and Ann was pictured here on the front page as being honored by the state legislature for her efforts on behalf of people like Gary and the men who are missing in action. A little over a year ago, Ann became aware of the Viva Voices in Vital America program that has been distributing some 5 million bracelets showing concern for the men missing in action and the prisoners of war. And she took to that like a duck to water, and in less than a year's time, I believe, it has been responsible for distributing over 25,000 of these bracelets. Anybody in here wearing a PW bracelet, or were they wearing one before they came home? Okay, very good. By the way, if Ann doesn't touch on this subject, Viva is asking that people do continue to wear them, buy them if you're interested in them, until some information has come out about the 1,300 men that are still missing. But with that, I'd like you to welcome Ann O'Connor.
Thank you, Rod. I used to think that I was really involved and that I really cared about people and that I was a good citizen, but I really hadn't until this past year. I finally realized that it's about time I got off my butt and did something instead of sit back and complain about how I didn't like what was happening in my country or in my hometown or in this world. So I made it my obligation to do something. And I feel that given the right opportunities to do it, there isn't anything I cannot do. And it's people like you and me that can make this country greater and that can bring about the change that we need. I decided to put my efforts behind the prisoner of war missing in action issue because at that time I felt that it was something I could devote my spare time to and see progress made, get to know the families, and to really get personal gratification out of it. But what it takes to keep this going is concerned citizens like you and me. The key word I use is involvement. To be involved doesn't mean to give all of your spare time or to do something every day to become a saint doing it, but just to take a few minutes a month to write a letter to your senator or congressman about some issue that you think needs some attention. Involvement can be any amount of help to an issue like the prisoner of war issue. Involvement can be a prayer. It just depends upon what you want to do. What I want to do doesn't mean that I'm going to push you to do something, but whatever you feel needs attention and public awareness, then get out there and do something instead of sit back and complaining. Over 1,900 men were imprisoned in Southeast Asia. Now that the ceasefire has come about, less than 5% of these men have returned, leaving over 1,300 men still missing in action. The term missing in action oftentimes comes up when I'm speaking and people say, well, that's just a polite way of saying they're dead. If they were dead, they would be listed as killed in action or died in captivity. But people like Ron Dodge, who was shown in a prison camp, I've got a bigger picture here of him, in North Vietnam. He was held prisoner of war. Pictures like this came out in the Paris Match magazine. Yet Ron Dodge wasn't on any list as having been in a prisoner of war camp or died in captivity. Where is people like Ron Dodge? Other cases, as of Lieutenant James Patterson from California. He was shot down in North Vietnam. He and his co-pilot were missing in action. His co-pilot came home, but where is Patterson? Same with people like Major Donovan, who is from California also. He was shot down, but his navigator was released through Hanoi. One of the bracelets I wear, Captain Stephen Hansen, he was a helicopter pilot, and there were 6 men in his crew, shot down in Laos. Out of the 6, they were known to have been alive for 5 days. 2 of the men were taken prisoner and held in North Vietnam. These men, out of these 2 men, one of them died in captivity, and the other one has been released. But he's so schizophrenic from his years of captivity and being in solitary confinement that he is unable to talk, so they do not know of men like Stephen Hansen. But what's happened to these guys? There's over 300 of them in Laos, and out of the 300, only 10 of them were released, and those 10 that were released were held in North Vietnam. We've got to know about the others. The families are still living in hell, not knowing, and it's up to you and me to find out. The families are at the end of their ropes. All they want to know is if their loved one is alive or dead. And a simple letter from you and me, once a month, once a week, however often you want to write it, to your senator or congressman, could help bring this man home. I had an opportunity to attend a seminar in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. I met my senators and congressmen there, and they knew of the work I am doing. And they told me, just straight facts, look, they said, if you don't get people to write to us and tell us that they're concerned about this issue, we're not going to do anything, because we've got letters coming in on other issues too. And just because you care doesn't mean everybody else cares. But they said if you get people to write letters, one letter speaks for 100 people. And if you can get people to do it, we'll do something too. But nobody's writing letters right now because they think everything's over because we're pulling out of Vietnam completely. And I feel that now more than ever we have to push. The effects of letter writing in the past have been tremendous. For instance, 1964 through 1967, the letters that came out of the prisoner of war camps in North Vietnam were only 366 in total. That's in 4 years' time. Okay, during the period between 1964 and 1969, many men were shot down. There were approximately 1,500 men being held prisoner of war. Yet in 1969, only 900 letters came out of these men. That's over a period of a year's time to the families. Now that's not much at all. So in 1969, VIVA, the National Prisoner of War Organization, put on a big fight. They had people writing letters to North Vietnam, to our senators and congressmen, to government and world leaders to put pressure on North Vietnam to allow them to let letters come from the prisoners and to them, from the families. Because of this letter-writing campaign, over 3,500 letters came out in 1970 from these men. That in itself is a big step because many more families found out their loved ones were alive. Surely we can be glad that peace is now coming. But these families will not live in peace. There's no peace for them until they know. A good friend of mine in Kenyon, Minnesota, Mary Danielson, has a 5-year-old son. Last summer she took her son down to an Air Force base where there was a ceremony in honor of Ben Danielson, her husband. At this ceremony was Ben's navigator, who did get rescued in Laos. Her husband Ben was not rescued because the jungle was so thick. Rescue attempts were impossible. At this ceremony, this navigator took Brian, who's only 5, he was 4 at the time, took him in an airplane like his father once flew. And as little boys are, he asked questions about his daddy. He had never seen him. And he'd ask things like, is my daddy big like you? And this navigator said, your daddy's a lot bigger. He's got courage. He's strong. You know, what's courage? How do you explain that to a little boy? How do you explain what missing in action means? So Brian asked more questions, and after this was over, they got out of the plane and they had a ceremony. And there were about 100 people there. And in front of the people, Brian ran up and screamed out loud, "But Mommy, will my daddy come home dead?" How do you tell a little boy that? I urge you, if you don't have an MIA bracelet, they're only $2.50. But with that bracelet comes an obligation to do something, to write a letter. That's all I'm asking, is to write a letter. There are other things you can do, and if you're interested, I have some material with me. We put out a newspaper once a month called The Voice of the Prisoners of War and Missing in Action. And I've got some on the table if you would like to take one with you. And on the back, if you send in the little tab here to the Burbank office in California, you can receive this free every month. And I also have some flyers with me with pictures of the men from Minnesota who are missing in action, telling a little bit about them and urging you to do something. In this magazine, I've got a picture of a man whose name is Nuc Grubb, standing here being guarded by a woman in North Vietnam. The North Vietnamese told Nuc Grubb's wife, Evelyn, that when he was shot down, he was critically injured and never recovered, and he died in the Hanoi Hilton. But this picture of Nuc Grubb shows him standing, and he doesn't look like he's very sick. Since the men have been released, they've told his wife that he was never critically injured. He had injuries, but he wasn't critically ill, that they knew him very well. But they took him away, and they didn't know what they did with him. They could have killed him, tortured him to death, or sent him to another camp. But Nuke Grubb appeared in the died in captivity list, yet there's no proof, and they refuse to admit what they did to him. Is Nuke Grubb still there? There's 52 other men in his same case that were prisoners of war, known to be held in camps, as was Ron Dodge. There's pictures of these men that have appeared in the Soviet satellite countries. Yet North Vietnam will not acknowledge ever having held these men. We have a dedication program if anybody is interested. It's called the Freedom Tree Dedication, and I think it would be kind of a beautiful thing to put on a college campus, and we've never done this in Minnesota yet. But there's plaques that are available, and I can give them to you. And they bear the name of men who are missing in action on them. And the idea behind it is to plant a tree and put the plaque on the ground in honor of the men missing. And as the tree grows, so will our freedom, but hopefully so will the freedom of these men someday. Many prisoners of war that have now returned have come out with statements saying that there are no more men left in North Vietnam to their knowledge. And this has been repeated over and over. But many men are now clarifying what they are saying. What they mean is there are no more men left in the camps that they were in, or in North Vietnam, that they know of. But they didn't realize how many men were missing in action in countries like Laos and in South Vietnam. So with the help of these prisoners that have returned, we hope to stir people up like you. I had the opportunity to talk with a man who was missing in action after the Korean War. 2 months before the war ended, his bomber crew and him were shot down over North Korea. They were taken prisoner of war and held in Red China. 2 years later, after the war had ended, the United States, by freak accident, found out that these men were being held prisoner. Because they found out, they negotiated terms and the men were released. But as Steve Kiba says, how many other men were there? After the Korean War, 389 men were left unaccounted for. 389. There are 1,332 in Southeast Asia. It's up to us. We have the freedom to use the power of writing a letter, just the power of telling other people about it, to do something. If we don't keep concerned and involved for these men still over there, then what the communists have told the prisoners of war is true. And that is, America simply doesn't care, and that they're going to rot and die in their prison camps. This is a humanitarian issue besides being a political issue. And I'm a humanitarian. And I think that with the efforts coming from people like you and like me, we can bring about needed change. Because after all, doesn't the essence of life consist of people caring about people? That means you, and that means me too. Thank you. Now it gives me great honor to introduce somebody who's very special. He is Gary Guggenberger from Cold Spring, Minnesota. He was a prisoner of war for 4 years in South Vietnam, held by the North Vietnamese in South Vietnam. And he is a man. Gary Guggenberger.
Thank you, Ann. Good morning. It's a pleasure to come to your college and talk. This is the first time I've come to a college, and kind of a little nervous. Mostly it's high school. And I haven't got anything really prepared to talk. Normally when I talk to someone, I just go on a question and answer basis because I feel I can get more accomplished if I sit up here rapping to you. I just talk circles anyhow. And this way you can get questions across that you might be interested in, what it was like in prison and my imprisonment. But first of all, I'd like to put forth a thought of what freedom really is like. We, the American people, you can't imagine, or we just don't know what it's like to be stripped of your freedom, to be treated lower than an animal, and to have someone oppress you all the time, just constantly be on you. It's so hard to visualize that. I know you can't do it. You could sit in the library and just try to imagine what it'd be like for someone to just lock you away in confinement and to be a vegetable and to treat you lower than an animal. But we, the American people, we're so spoiled. It's unreal. After living in prison, coming back and just seeing the way we live again. Since I left in '68, and now that I come back, we're going twice as fast, I think, our way of life. We don't slow down. We don't take anything in consideration. We don't think of other people, feelings of other people. And because of this, our morals are just depleting more and more in our country, and something's going to have to be done because of it. And like what has happened in Vietnam right now, it was a mistake, the whole works, and because of our morals being like this, we're going to get caught into it again if people don't start thinking about this. But the American people should stop and think we're the biggest power in the world. But we don't stop and think of what it would be like if, let's say, Russia just jumped dead on us and come in and start tearing up the United States and try to take your freedom away. And probably if people would think of it like that, they'd learn to really appreciate what we've got. You get up in the morning, you can stuff your face, you go to school, you go to work, or anytime you want to go any place, there's nothing holding you up. You go to a rock concert or you go to some sports, and we just have the freedom, and we just take it for granted. It's an everyday thing. But there's once you start trying to picture of having your freedom stripped from you, and you just eliminate all this from you, from your life, just isolate yourself. And I don't know, like I say, it's awful hard to imagine it, but it's something worth trying to do. I know, like I say, it's very hard, but I think if you can realize this, what freedom really is, it's going to make a new person out of you. Because myself, I came out of prison and I've changed completely. I'm a completely different person since I've gone back home. All my friends have noticed I'm just more open-minded. Like I tell a lot of people, they don't buy it, but I have no hang-ups, really. I look at it, I accept another person's view. A lot of people are too stubborn to do this, but I don't let things bother me because of the troubles that I've gone through. The troubles that we face are so minor that it's not even worth thinking about half of them. But right now, most Americans, they go bananas over just little problems. They get so excited over it, but because we have never endured hardships, we've never faced war, hunger, starvation, sickness. And this is another thing that I found out right away when I was captured. Well, I got shot up when I got captured, and right there was a lot of pain, and I thought I was really hurting. And they'd say, "You'll learn to endure. You'll learn to endure." This is what the interpreter would always tell us. And then you start getting headaches, and you start hitting the doctors, the medical workers up for aspirins and stuff. You know, that's the first thing you do. You wake up in the morning, if you're hungover or you got a headache or something, boom, into the medicine cabinet, and you start taking medicine. And myself, this is the first thing I was doing too. And I'd get sick, I'd go and start taking some pills for it. But when I got in prison, it just says, we don't have. Try to suffer. You'll learn to endure. And this is exactly what they'd make us do. And by doing it, they had the medicine, but they were trying to teach us a lesson because we come from such a spoiled society. We have everything. We have it when we want it. We want something now, we get it. If not, we're just going to go and we're going to take it. And they were trying to show us this, I feel, in the treatment that we received a lot of times. They wanted us to suffer and to let us know what it's like to go without something. When you need medicine, you're sick. Probably like at times we had dysentery for a month straight and no medicine. Just day after day after day, your stomach would just be completely messed up. and they just smile at you and say, no medicine, we don't have it. And they just let you suffer. Just keep on going, keep on going. And here again, I learned a lot. For now, little things, they don't bother me because of this. I'll suffer. I think by doing it, I've learned a lot. It was good for me in ways. I mean, it sounds crazy to suffer, but it did. It opens your mind up. You start thinking of what it must really be like to be living over in Indochina, in Africa, and some of your other poor countries, because these people are just going through this daily for all their life. They're suffering. So it's one thing I'd like to mention is trying to realize it. For we're the upcoming Americans, and some people in here are probably going to be some leaders someday, but we're the ones that are going to have to change things. And once you start realizing, open up your minds and start thinking of the value of freedoms, and you can express yourself like these MIAs. I know how these guys feel. At times we got very depressed and said, like the North Vietnamese, they said the American people don't care about us. At one time we believed this. I thought I'd never come home. It was even in '69 already. It happened, and many of us happened. Some attempts of suicide were made because we had no faith in the American people, and we figured the war was going to continue. So some guys would try to hang themselves or hit themselves with sticks, try to over the head or something, try to kill himself, because you just lose complete faith in the people. Because we just sit back and take everything for granted. As long as nothing's coming out of his pocketbook and no one's hurting him, he just lets it go by. But there was 1,300 guys over there that are hurting right now. Some of these guys are dead, true, but there's a lot of them. I'm fully convinced too that they're still holding guys as I don't know for what reason, a hostage or what, but they've got them there. I'm sure of it. And it's through people like you, I, that we have to get out and we have to say something. Tell our system, tell our administration, we need action, we want action. They have to do something, get these guys out. And on other points throughout, if you don't agree on something, by all means, go ahead and write a letter. At least let them know, because if you don't, if everyone thinks like this, well, why should I write, just one letter? But if everyone thinks this way, we're never going to get nothing done. We'll just be led astray for the rest of our lives. People up on top are just going to ring us around. So it's something that we have to do is open up our minds and start taking part in what is going on around us. Briefly, I'll tell you a little what, while I was in Nam, I went over in 68 and in July. I got captured in 69 January. I was in transportation, and it was an ambush. I got taken in. I spent 4 years, 2 months. 14 months of this was in confinement. They isolated. And the way we lived in a cage. We had wooden cages, and you'd have a chain. You had a chain on your leg, and you're chained to the cage. And the only time the chain would come off if you had to go and do some work, or you went to bathe, or you had to go and defecate. And this is the only time this chain would ever get off your leg. Otherwise, you had to sleep with it, and it was on your leg. And the length of the chains, some guys had probably a chain of 4 foot long. I was lucky; mine was about 7 foot long. And this is all the movement we had during the day. You could walk, pace, and this is the way prisoners in the South. So many people have the idea that we were held in a concentration camp. Well, it wasn't like this. We had a cage, probably it was 20 yards away from you or something. There would be a couple other guys living, and you weren't to talk with them. Sometimes they'd just have a completely brush. They'd tear out as little camouflaging brush as possible so they could build a cage and you'd be hidden because of air activity. You have a lot of helicopters, a lot of reconnaissance planes coming over taking photos, and a few times we were caught. Out of my 4 years in prison, I went through about 19 camps, and about 15 of those we were bombed out or we got shelled. A few of them, B-52s hit us. They ran through our camp. We got kicked out, but for that time, I was on the move. We'd go from camp to camp. We'd get kicked out of one camp. They'd take you. You'd stop in a jungle someplace. They'd pick out another area. You'd start building bunkers, and they'd build some more cages for us, and they'd throw us in the cages until the next time we get bombed out or an operation starts. So I'll just open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, I'll answer them, and I just hope they don't get too heavy.
Were you aware of the anti-war movement going on at the time you were in prison? What was your attitude towards it?
Well, yes, we were aware of it. We had a radio broadcast that come out of Hanoi, Hanoi Hannah, and she'd tell us what's going on. And of course, it's all to one side again. It was a communist broadcast. It was all to their liking. But we were told about the anti-war movement. Some of it I go along with very strongly for. This is the reason that I'm out. I firmly believe this. It was through some of the anti-war movement and through actions of Viva, the bracelets, and people demanding that they want us prisoners back. But some of it got carried away. I don't go along with it. As for the fact is, Miss Fonda, she goes out and she talks pretty heavy on a lot of things, which living with these people, I know how they operate, and I know the way they strung her along. It's a typical thing. Whenever a official of the VC would come to our camp, everything would change. We'd start getting better food. The guards are real nice to us. They ask, at night they'd probably come and give you an extra cigarette, especially if he's going to talk to you personally. They'd do anything. You'd even get sugar or some canned milk or something. They just really butter you up good. And as soon as they leave, it's just boom, there it goes again. You're back eating fish heads. And this is, I'm sure, is what happened in North Vietnam when they take the anti-war people went over there. This is what they did. They doctored it up. Guys had to go and see them, and they saw these bombings and things. Like I become a real good friend of a pilot. He was in the Hilton, and they hit this hospital. As you remember, Jane Fonda made quite a big stink about this hospital. Well, right behind the hospital was the biggest logistic compound in North Vietnam, where the North Vietnamese had all their logistics, all their trucks in the biggest maintenance area. Of course, the jets went in. They were dropping on this. They weren't dropping directly on this hospital, as she was advocating that this is what was being done. We were bombing hospitals. The target was the motor pool, the logistic compound. This is what was happening. And a lot of these places, this is what these people will do too. They will go and they'll put a military installation next to a university. Or they'll probably even put anti-aircraft guns on top of it. And then they expect, as soon as you go and you try to knock it out, then shame, you're bombing the school, you're killing all the young, and you're killing all the kids. This is the one thing that they do. It was used for to put public pressure on the Americans. But like I say, there was a lot of it that anti-war movement that I go along with, because I feel this woke up the American people, and they realized that there are some guys over there, prisoners, and there was really no outlook for it. Ever coming home after. I was quoted once. It was according like the press, how they goof things up. There was an article this guy from the Minneapolis Tribune wrote, and he says, what was my darkest day in prison? And I said, when Nixon was reelected. And I explained myself because at this time our administration had stepped up the bombing. They had the blockade, and I cannot see no military victory to these people at this late in the game because of the way they're dug in. And to stop a guerrilla like this, you just can't do it that easy. And I figured either I'd die there of a disease or I'd probably get bombed again, and I knew one of these times I'm going to get hit. So this was my dark day. I just couldn't believe it. It happened, and I thought I was there for another 4 years. So we started thinking of a mass break. We never thought of it before because the chances, if you ever get caught, and if you ever slug a guard or something, you hit one of them, you're going to be dead if you get caught again. And if we were going to do this, we're going to have to try to overpower the camp. And so we would have been in, if we wouldn't have succeeded, we all would have been dead. So we got to that point where we didn't care. If we were going to die, we weren't about to spend another 4 years in that hole. And so we started making our plans for it. But it came through that enough pressure was applied to the administration as where finally they had to make the move. They made the move to get us out. And that's why I think I give credit to people like Ann in the Viva and movement, and through some of the anti-war movement. I think that it helped us getting out.
Loaded with questions. Let's get some hands up here.
Do I resent? Well, like we put it, it was 4 years lost in space. Yeah, I went in when I was 21 and I come out 26. And it was my good years. But I've learned a lot from it. Like I say, I think I'll be a better person, a better citizen, and all around. So it's hard to say it was a complete loss because I've gained so much out of it. So I have no resentments, I don't hate the people for it. I went to Vietnam and I got coming to me. I went in a war zone. You get captured, you got no complaints. You were there. So I can't hold any bitter feelings to them. I'm just thankful they spared my life. For I was an enlisted man, and normally if they capture an enlisted man, right away he'll be executed or they'll torture him. But I don't know, maybe my size did it. I was a big guy, and all these people are small. If you get one that's about 5'4", it's a Will Chamberlain for them. They're just short. And I don't know, maybe they wanted to keep me as a specimen. I don't know. Something, because I had no information. Just being a truck driver, you have no information at all.
Was there any torture carried out in that camp?
No, we weren't tortured. I don't know. Probably the reason is our living conditions. They had to kind of pacify us a little bit because of the way we lived. We could make trouble for them, and they were definitely afraid of us. Whenever you get off your chain, the guards would back up, and they didn't trust you at all. So this might be the reason too. If they start torturing us, we're going to start getting wild. And our commander spoke English. He understood our ways, and he used to tell us, we'd start giving the guards a lot of static. So then he'd go and talk to the senior man. Normally he'd talk to an officer, and he'd take an enlisted man and talk with him. And he'd tell him, start cutting, knock it off. You're giving my guards too much static. They're getting mad. He says, take it easy on them for a little while. Let them cool off. He was really nice guy. He just says, just take it easy for a while. Don't give them so much static. They're getting mad at you. And so I think this is part of the reason too we lucked up and we didn't have any tortures. He understood us, and he knew a lot about the states. We used to talk with him. He knew a lot about New York, Chicago. They met this one. He studied here. He knew New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, L.A., and Dallas by the back of his hand. He's been here. He's got it. I don't know if it was, he went through one university or two. He studied in the States. And then he went back to Vietnam to fight.
Gary, can you explain why there were so many North Vietnamese or more North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese in your area? You were in South Vietnam.
Yes, we were in South Vietnam, and I was captured by North Vietnamese and detained by them. The area that we were in was one of the heaviest concentrated areas for North Vietnamese, and I feel they needed the manpower in the South to carry on the fight, so they just brought down NVA troops, used them as guarding prisoners, and then they had all the South Vietnamese humping the boonies. And this is why they needed the manpower. Instead of letting the NVA go out and do the fighting first, they'd let the South do it, and then once they start getting bumped off, well, then the NVA would have to start to fight.
What contact did you have with the Viet Cong?
Well, like it's so hard to say. Like every time we go on a move, everyone would be dressed in their NVA uniforms, pith helmets, grenades, pistol belts, and they'd have the whole bit. But I'm sure there was some VC, South Vietnamese in our camp. It was just you couldn't pick them out. You could tell a lot of those from the north, though, they kept themselves a lot cleaner. They had nicer clothes. Their hair was kept better. And we had a few guys that were just kind of messy. And so these guys probably were from the south, that they just didn't have the background that the guys from the north, because most of them from the north at least had a 8th grade education. A lot of them had high school. And well, one time we got 30 guys in our camp. They were all college grads from University of Hanoi. They spoke English, and they came down. They were our guards for a while. And we had a pretty good time with these guys. We just started talking about what Hanoi was like, and we tell them what the States is like. And a lot of it they won't believe, of course. You try to tell them what kind of house and stuff you have, they just don't, they won't accept it. They just can't believe it. They've got their own belief. They're indoctrinated this way, and that's it, and you're not going to change your mind. If you say something to them, you're just lying.
There's been a lot of stories circulating in this country, often conflicting stories about the use of drugs among the Americans. One story I heard is that at least a third of the Americans who were killed and they were stolen. They were all mixed with side effects and so forth. I wonder if you could talk about the use of drugs, the use of drugs, and some of the ramifications.
Well, it's true. When I was over there, the marijuana was pretty heavy then. We had a couple guys in our camp who were, I think they were hooked. This one kid, he was probably about 170 when he came over, and when I was there yet, he was about 130, just a wreck. And he was just constantly blown away. His mind wasn't at all in Vietnam, hardly ever. If he didn't have a J in his mouth, I'm sure he went and shot up with something. Because this guy, half the time he couldn't drive his truck. He was too wiped out. And you find a lot of your infantry were using it. Your medical corps, especially. I talked to a lot of guys, and the medics were sneaking shots out, using it themselves when they had a contact. He'd shoot himself up, and so he could go out, and they say they can perform their job a lot better this way. I knew a major. He knew his medic was doing it, but his medic did such an outstanding job. He saved so many guys' lives that he couldn't turn them in. And this major is a hardcore. He's a green beanie, special force, and he was a hardcore, but he didn't want to turn the guy in because of this. But then I've had friends that told me that they on operations in the field, guys that were blown away, were shot up with something. They just got up in a line of fire and started running and screaming right at the enemy, and were chopped down, and trying to make a hero out of himself, or he just got something snapped on him and knew where he was going to go, and grab a couple grenades and just start running at a machine gun, and they just wipe them out. It happens. Drugs were, I guess, was it in 70, we got this helicopter was shot down, in 71 too, when this other kid came to our camp, and they said it was really getting bad. Marijuana was nothing anymore. It was opium and heroin and cocaine. They were really hitting it pretty heavy, in Saigon. And see, I come from Long Binh. It was the largest logistic compound in Vietnam, and it was just like stateside duty. 3 nights a week you had rock and roll bands and strippers, and heck, it wasn't a war for us. And all we did, get in our trucks, drive out the gate, and we'd drive out and to the infantry. That's the only time that we were really exposed to fighting and stuff. But you find a lot of guys in Long Binh and places were using it and trying to send it home. The jail there, it's called Long Binh, so the name of the jail is LBJ, and that place is just full of them. Guys at 6 months' time. This, for your first offense, you get 6 months and a court-martial. That place is just full of them. That's all it was. Some guys, I don't know, like, it all depends who you talk to and his stand on it. I lived with one kid from Long Beach. He was wasted, and he just couldn't wait to get back to it. He used to pop LSD, and I had all the names down pat. He was telling me all about this stuff. I used to talk with him all day, just occupy my time. I wanted to find out what this drugs were all about, and he's popping all these pills, these psychedelics, the purples, the greens, the reds, and then he started dropping, I don't know what else, some other drug he was telling me, and but he was so slow. If he'd get any slower, he'd be going backwards. This guy was unreal. He just couldn't think. It'd take him forever. He'd just sit there and, like, he'd get his food and he'd just look at it like, now what? And I know he's going to be a total wreck now, because he couldn't wait to get back. And we had another kid from Brooklyn. He shouldn't have been in the service. He's retired from the beginning. This kid, he was a draftee, one of McNamara's boys, and he was in, and this guy, well, he was retired. He walked out of a base camp, just walked over the fence. He said some voices were talking to him, and he walked out in his rice paddies, and a bunch of little kids came up with pitchforks and got him, and told him they were going to kill him, and they went and got their mom and dad, and so they took him and he became a prisoner. And him too, same thing. He's a complete waste. He admits it. He said if the army wouldn't have got him, he'd be dead already, because he's just skin popping at this time. And he was telling me all about these buddies of his. They go and pull break-ins at night to get the money for their stuff, and he's supposed to be their watchman. And he's really a card. He'd tell us, he gets so dang scared the cops would start coming. He'd just panic, and he'd let his buddies sit, and he'd shag it. And they'd always let him come back. They never got rid of him because he didn't know what he was doing. But this kid's a waste. He was taking drugs, and we had another guy. It was really funny. He was a hippie. He was civilian. He came over to. He served over in 67. He's in 1st Division. He met this girl over there, and he liked her. He got hung up on her. So then he went back to the States, and he went to school. And he came back to Saigon to teach English. He was teaching for a while, and he got hurt. He went home, and then he came back again, and then Saigon kicked him out. So he came back to the States again, and he was so hung up on her, so he had to go back again. So he went back, he went through Cambodia, and he come across, he was in the country illegally, and like an idiot, he was walking down a road, and there was a firefight going on with some helicopters, Cobras, and when he walks into it, he goes walking right up, and he got nabbed. And it was so funny, here he had this long hair, and they didn't know what to make of this guy. And his hair was down to here, and it was just curled, and they didn't know what the heck he was, and he'd come asking, he says, "What's a hippie?" And he kept asking him, "What's a hippie?" And we tried to explain to him. And then, the funny part, he kept telling him, "I'm a civilian, I was over here to see a girl." And they said, sure, and here, he was nailed as a spy. The dumb nut comes over. When he was over here, he sent all his equipment home. He had all green beanie stuff. Special forces, rucksack, sleeping bags, poncho liners, jungle survival kit, jungle tiger fatigues camouflaged. And here he got caught with this stuff, and he tries to tell him he's a civilian. He's got nothing but a military issue pack. And they just said, sure, sure. You know, says, you're CIA, you're a spy. And they just put the chain on his leg. And he just he raised all kinds of heck about it. And one day they come to cut his hair. And this was really funny. He didn't want to cut, and so they had to. They told him, you know, we're gonna cut your hair. We're gonna cut your hair. And he says, nope, nope. He wrapped a cloth around it. He wouldn't let him get near him. And this went on, and he was in the bunker next to me, and I was just laughing because I knew he's gonna get a cut. You got a chain on your leg. You're nobody, and they got the weapons. So it was a matter of time, and they let him go, and all of a sudden the guards came. They got some of the bigger guys. And we had one, a Shaggy Bear, we call him. He's a pretty good sized dude. And they unlocked him, and they told him they had to go talk with the commander. They got back there, and they tied him up, and they pinned his head up against the deal, and they says, you know, let us cut your hair voluntarily, or do we have to force you? So he says, all right, cut it. And then, so he says, if you're going to cut it, though, you're going to cut every bit off of it. So he walked out with hair down here, and he came back. He's a skinhead. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. He comes walking in, and after a while, though, then this kid from California, that Speedy, he wanted to let his hair grow. So then he refused to get his hair cut, and we had a little roundabout there. Call him the first sergeant come in the bunk, and he started pulling on his chain to try to drag him out. He fell on the ground and went and put a couple of heel stomps on his head and kicked him in the stomach. And finally they ended up taking him back too, tied him up like a pig. Shaved him too. These guys, you know, they want to have the long hair. They told us that it was going to go, but this hippie was really a nice guy, but mixed up. Really mixed up. He didn't want to come home. When we were getting released, he refused to come with. And he wanted to stay in Vietnam. He was thinking probably go to Red China to live. And he was really a mixed up. And this kid was on drugs at one time. He told me he dropped LSD and took all of it, and he doesn't like it. He said it's an scapegoat. That's all he used it for. He says, you can do that much with your mind if you just find yourself, start thinking, and really try to analyze yourself. You don't need to use a drug to set your frame of mind to think. And so he was against it. And like I said, he went through all the trips and smoked and did everything. But he was against it too.
Gary, I just might respond to the gentleman's question on drugs. Gary, of course, was captured second week of January '69. I was still over there. I then returned home for 18 months. When I went back, it was unbelievable change in the drug consumption. When I was there in '68 and '69, it was mostly conversation. You didn't run into too many guys that were strung out. But in '71, it was a sickening sight. I remember the Big Red 1, First Division. They had units that were maybe 60% saturated. And they put all the flunkies in here then when they started going that way, when they knew they couldn't control it. And then that got to be a clique. And they didn't want the other 40% with them. And I knew guys, and there's one from New Hope, Minnesota, that cried out to me and says, God help me. They're making one out of me. And because he talked against drugs. They took him and they spread eagled him against on the floor. And they took a shirt off a guy. Now you got to imagine this, here comes the shirt. And they stuck the arm over his head. And held it tight around his face, and then guys were taking cigarettes for marijuana that was laced with heroin. And they blow down this thing, and it was the only air the man could get. And they so hated his resistance against drugs that that's what they did with him. Well, I finally got involved in that particular situation, and he got transferred out. But in 1971, when I first got over there, the government just refused to accept a problem with drugs. They looked the other way. They had enough troubles. And it just made me so damn mad that nobody was showing any concern for these people, especially a guy like that just didn't want anything to do with it. So Gary really didn't see any of that other than the few guys that came into his camp. But in 71, I really wouldn't challenge your statistics. They're possible. The third seems awfully high, though, as far as battlefield casualties are concerned. It tended to be that a unit that was clean wouldn't allow a junkie into them. They'd work them over. You know what a GI bath is, the wire brushes and stuff. If they got a guy that was even smoking pot and they didn't believe in it, this guy would never do it again in their presence. But then you got a unit that was fouled up in any defense. I saw two fellas that were going on the real strong hashes. They were holding a bunker position down one night, and they'd gotten it from an old Papa Son. Papa Son intentionally saw to it that these guys got it because he knew their schedule and he knew they'd like it. And that night was the penetration of the wire. Thank God the second burglar held, and I think it was 4 BC that came through and they killed 2 and captured the other 2. I think came right through these guys. They were just having a ball down there. But 71 was a bad scene. Finally, the military woke up and decided it was going to have to do something, and that's when they removed the punishment. They had this amnesty program over there. You could come in and drop your stuff in a box, and nobody took your picture, and if you went in and sought medical help, there was no record made. So, belatedly, the military did accept the problem.
How has the past changed your future?
Well, I've become more open-minded. Like I said, I just feel like I have no hang-ups anymore, as of now. And it's going to make me more aware of the political situation, make me more aware of feelings of other people. Before I was guilty, I'd just go step on someone. It didn't bother me. You just go on, you know, but not anymore because I know what it's like. And that's why I think it's just made a complete and better person out of me. And I'm not as, I hope I never get the way I was. I've got enough to remember. All I have to do is just think back a little bit or take a look at a scar on my body and just think, you know, what it was like, and probably for the rest of my life I'll be able to catch myself if I start getting out of hand again. But it's opened my mind up very much.
What are you planning as far as a career?
Well, I was going to go into forestry, but I guess it's so tight, and I've gotten some offers to be a sales representative for a firm up in Sartell at Zurich Corporation, and I've been thinking I'll go back to school, take up marketing and business, and then go into that probably. All depends. While I'm single, it'd be great. I was informed that they just opened a plant in England, so I'd be the shuttle between the States and England, and so that'd be kind of tough for a while. But we've had offers from other Bell Telephone, NSP, Remington Ram, Control Data's offered a scholarship for me. You can get jobs like this, but I don't care. I like to get out and meet people, and so I was like the forestry. Well, that's so tight. I love nature. I hunt, fish, and just camping, and that's what I enjoy the most. But I'll probably take up this job back in Sartell after I get out of school.
Gary, why don't you tell them about food? How often would you get protein, and what quantities was your food given you?
Well, yeah, there's another. Before I went in, I was really a fussy eater. I remember when I was a little kid, every time my mom would make roast beef, I'd run away. And no failing, every Sunday I was running away, because that's about, we had roast beef every Sunday when I was a little kid, and I was always this way. She'd put cheese on something, over meatballs or something like that, and I'd just raise a roof, because she went and messed up the meat. She put this on. I've been like this all my life until now. You just put anything in front of me. As long as it's put on a table, it's edible, I'm putting it down. After eating our meals, we got rice, 3 meals a day. Protein, very little as far as on the meat line. Fish, and well, it wasn't all that great. A lot of fish heads we'd have, like they'd get probably a 10-pound fish or something like this, and they chop the head off, and they'll chop out this much of the tail off, and they boil it in water and throw some salt in it, and they give it to us. That feeds 12 guys. We might get 2 heads and 2 tails, and so you start breaking up the head, and one guy gets half the head or part of it, and Some guys would just use what they call nook bomb, the salt water is what it is, and eat your rice with this. But we got a lot of fish in the head. And as far as meat-wise, once in a while we lucked up, they'd shoot an antelope or probably a wild pig. And then we get down into the lower categories, skunks, porcupines, rats, snakes, dogs, cats, vultures. You know, that doesn't taste too bad, really. It was unbelievable. We knew it. I knew it. We got it. And after they got it cooked up, you know, it wasn't that bad. One time we got something, I don't know where they picked it up. It had to be dead for a couple of years, I think. It was really rotten. We all got sick off of it. There's some wild meat that... every now and then, it depends on the doctor. If we start getting down where if we'd ever get bombed and we had to go on a move, our physical health was so bad probably that we couldn't make it. So the doctor would give the order out that they had to feed us up. So they'd send out hunters and a lot of monkey. That was mainly like we were going to have a feed up, they go shoot monkeys. And that couple times they made it real good, just like they had monkey hips or the ribs or something, but kind of like with a barbecue sauce on. It was pretty good. That way. I didn't like it when they boiled it because I got sick as a dog then. That and boiled dog, jeez.
Take you a while to get used to eating that stuff? Use it for a while until you got hungry?
Yeah. At first I didn't eat. When I first got captured, I didn't eat for a week. And then I don't know, I just couldn't eat. I got hit. I lost a lot of blood, and we had to walk for 14 days. And I didn't want to eat, and then finally they give me some rice soup made into like oatmeal mush with sugar, and I put this down, and then they started giving me that to eat. When I got to the prison camp, they try to make meals like they made a pretty good noodle soup, rice soup with chicken and pork, or they'd cook special for me until gradually they'd start goofing it up a little more, and then finally one day they flipped this fish on me, and I just told them I hate it. I can't eat fish. I get sick. And I smelt it, and that did it. I didn't even dare put my teeth in it yet. And I just told him, I says, I don't eat fish. I get sick. I never ate them at home. I can't stand them. And he says, you will learn to eat. And he walked away, and I just threw it away. And threw my rice away, and I kept this up, and then finally, like he said, you will learn to eat. You get so doggone hungry that you got to start eating it. And I started off, I used to peel the scales off of it, and then throw all this away, and I'd pick the meat off the bones, and probably get like a fish this big, and here you are operating with your fingertips, trying to pull these scales off and take the meat off the bones. So this went on for a while, and then it got to be such a hassle, so finally I made one move. I started eating the scales with the meat, and then after a while I graduated and I started eating the bones, the backbone and the tail, and that was probably it took me a year before I started throwing heads in. Then I started eating the fish heads, and after that, it didn't mess my stomach up too bad. You get a lot of dysentery no matter what you eat. Sometimes they make this fish in one way. It just really, I liked it. Everyone else gets sick from it, so I'd get all their fish. I'd have a mound of them, and the guards hated it. They didn't like it because I was eating more than them. But all my guys that I lived with, they'd give me their fish. They wouldn't eat it. It just seemed funny, like it was going to hurt the pride of someone. None of the officers in our camp would eat a fish head. All the the enlisted, we were all just chowing down on these things like crazy. And it was something to get your rice down. And like we said, it's a little more protein. So it was funny, though. We used to get on these officers, what is it going to hurt your pride or something, that you got to stoop down and eat a fish head? And they just wouldn't do it at all. They just said, never. never would they do it. But
Gary, can you talk about the attempted escape in which you saved up rice balls for the guy?
oh, we had this one kid. You probably heard on the news. His name was Sexton from Detroit. He escaped. He was in my camp, and we were saving our rice, packed up rice ball. This is another. They give you a rice ball. They cook rice. They pack it in a good ball, and then they give you that with some salt to eat. We aided him. He had when we got kicked out of a camp. Helicopters kicked us out, and so we went to this other, in a jungle we set up, and he already had his chain just about cut. He took his dentures out. He had plates. He had 4 fronts, and he used a stainless steel on the back. And when we got with him, he was almost out, and it was just the ideal thing for him. Here he had to cut his chain, plus he had to get out of these cages. So now we got kicked out of the camp. The helicopters came, so we were living wide open, so he had no problem. So we stored our rice for him. We got caught. They caught us, and they come and checked his chain, and 3 times. The first sergeant, 2 first sergeants checked these chains, and he had the cuts made. He was already through, but he stuffed it with mud and some material and some sap, and he passed over it all 3 times. And the commander just talked to him, and he asked him, he says he knows we're up to something. He knows something's going on. And that night, he took off, and they caught him again. Brought him back, told him naughty, shouldn't do that. And that was in May. He escaped, and in July they let him go home. I don't know what. He just lucked up. He had 2 escapes on him. In '69 he escaped, and he was walking around for about 4 or 5 hours. He walked right back into camp in the kitchen and got caught again. And there again, they just said, naughty, you shouldn't do that. And they never gave him anything for it. But they let him go after. And then they told us, if we don't play King Rat, if anyone tries to escape and you know it and you don't turn them in, you will be punished worse than the guy that escaped. So that was the new policy in our camp. And we just told him, well, you're just going to have to do it, because with that, the guy's going to go, he's going to go. We told him it's his life. If he wants to do it, he can do it, but they don't buy it. That's the way they are, too. They're buddies with one guy, but they'll turn right around the next minute and they'll just put the blade right in his back. And that's why they're not true friends. They'll stab you in the back in a second for a gain for himself. When it was funny, we had that food, and when we got caught, the guy says he was hungry. He wanted to eat in the middle of the night. Here the interpreter comes and asks, what's going on? Why you have these rice balls? And he was trying to explain to him that he's so dang hungry. They weren't feeding us enough. And so he had all his rice packed up, made into a ball. And he's just trying to bring it across that he was so dang hungry. And he says, well, if you're hungry, then you just ask the guard for it at night. And they took the rice away from him. And so they didn't get it when they left. They took toothpaste. They were going to took a tube of toothpaste, and they're going to put that on top of the ants and bugs that they catch, and then flavor it up a little bit and eat the bugs. Instead of, he couldn't quite get himself to eat the bugs, he had to just pop them in the mouth and chew them, so he's going to put toothpaste on it. I tried it once, not on bugs though. They were giving us, I call gunpowder. They were trying to give us a bunch of junk because there was some bombings going around. So they gave us salt and black pepper, and to me that was the worst thing that they could have ever brought. And so I quit eating, and I started getting weak. So I took my toothpaste and I squirted it on top of my rice. I mixed it up in my rice, and it tastes like popcorn. I couldn't believe it. So I ate my whole bowl of rice, and after that I got sick as heck. My stomach just went bananas on me. I had a gut ache. I asked for the doctor, and he come, and they asked me what happened. And I told them, I can't eat the gunpowder. So I tried toothpaste, and they couldn't believe it, the interpreter. So after that, they wouldn't get